Welcome back. Eskom is implementing continuous stage 6 load shedding until further notice, as I'm sure we all know by now, and that's after Unit 2 of Koeberg tripped yesterday. So effectively this means both of Koeberg's units are now offline. Meanwhile, reports suggest that the power utility effectively implemented stage 8 power cuts last week without alerting consumers. There are also warnings that the situation may get worse this winter. For more this morning, we're joined by energy expert Hilton Trollip, joins us via our video link this morning. Hilton, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. I mean, if this is true, if Eskom did implement stage 8 load shedding, sort of on the side, sort of slipped it in there, what do you make of it?
So it is true that the gap between supply and demand exceeded 7,000 megawatts. And if Eskom were to have solved that problem solely by load shedding, in other words, cutting supply to normal customers, such as you and I, then it would have needed to have a stage 8 schedule. But what they did instead is they cut the supply to a big industrial customer. Mm-hmm. So they have so-called interruptible supply contracts with some big industrial customers. The trouble there, I think they should be more forthcoming, because when they cut the supply to the big industrial customers, firstly, Eskom pay a penalty, they lose the revenue from the sales of the electricity, and also the economy loses the production from these big industrial customers. So I think they should communicate that, because by not communicating it, they make us worry about their honesty and their lies of omission and their lies of commission. And Eskom have been quite good until now in terms of the facts that they give us. But I think this is a slip-up, and I think they need to sort out their communications about this.
Yeah, so you're saying play open cards with the South African public, because ultimately what's happening is by cutting supply to a big industrial customer, it's having an impact on South Africa and the people living here anyway, because of that impact on the economy, the impact on Eskom's income.
Absolutely. The taxpayers will pay, because it means Eskom debt doesn't get paid by just that amount for that day, but if it happens a lot, we pay for it. The electricity customers pay, and the economy pays. We pay with jobs, etc. So they must play open cards. But what is important is we have now moved into a situation where the supply-demand gap has got a bit bigger. And the supply-demand gap is very variable, because the performance of these big machines is unpredictable, but they're unreliable, which is why we have load shedding. And we know now that on average, their availability is 50%. And it's that on average that there's the problem with. Because fixing them on average means they all need to be better maintained. And to be better maintained, Eskom is now in a situation, it's an organization that's designed to to be maintaining about 10 or 15 of these machines at a time. But they're having to maintain 30. And at the same time, the organization is undermined by corruption, cadre deployment, there's a huge debt overhang, and so it's just, it can't. We're asking too much of it. And the solution is getting generation onto the grid, new generation, and the Energy Ministry, the Minerals and Energy Ministry, which is responsible for that, is simply failing to do that for many reasons. But that is where the long-term solution lies, and we need to start doing it now. This latest 90-minute interview with the electricity minister, where he said he needs a whole lot more money to go and fix these machines, is a pipe dream. The finance minister said no, and even so, you can't throw money at these things. You have to throw an organization that's different from Eskom, and changing Eskom will take as long as to change those machines. We've tried it. We've thrown hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of taxpayer money, government bailouts at Eskom, and that's not where the solution lies.
So new generation capacity is what we need, and we've known that for a very long time, right? We've spoken to you on this program and many other experts over many, many years, and that's been the tagline. New generation capacity is what we need. But you're saying that Eskom is not the organization to implement that new generation capacity, because very clearly they can't be trusted?
Well, no, not that. The official government policy is that new generation will be independent power producers. So if I can just explain how that works. What happens is an auction is held by a government, and developers, project developers, offer new generation, and they get given contracts. They then spend their money, they build their power supplies, and then they sign a contract with Eskom, and then Eskom only pays for the power that it receives from them. No public money goes in there, lots of power flows, and unfortunately, there is a resistance to this. Firstly, from the organized labor movement, because they see this as privatization of the utility, this new money invested by the private sector. So it's not privatization of existing assets, but they've resisted this. They've taken these IPPs to court. And secondly, the current energy minister and past energy ministers, not all of them, but most of them, they've simply been against renewable energy. I think for ideological reasons. Some people say because they can't make money out of it through coal contracts, but for whatever reason, the fact of the matter is that the Minerals and Energy Department have failed in their constitutional and legal mandate to get new generation capacity onto the grid. And that is the source of this problem.
Hilton, is there alternative energy out there? What I'm trying to ask in a very clumsy way is the capacity there and we're not bringing it online?
So there isn't. There's a little bit. So the existing IPPs, there are about 6,000 megawatts of them. Not all of their capacity is being used, but that's not a substantial amount to get rid of load shedding. But what there is we have got one of the most magnificent renewable energy resources in the world, sun and wind, both of them. And what there are project developers and financiers lining up to sign contracts. But there is some good news, if I've got the time to tell you, Michelle. So the president basically twisted the energy minister's arm and made him issue exemptions for people, private customers, to buy IPPs, to set up IPPs. So what happened? That happened halfway through last year. Already last year, some 1,700 megawatts. That's a lot of projects were registered with NERSA. They don't have to be licensed now. It's easy. You can just register them. They just have to meet some technical specifications. And in the first 3 months of this year, 2,400 megawatts were registered. Half of that wind, which is really good because it complements the PV. So what's happening is the private sector is sorting itself out. What's happening is big industries are signing contracts with IPPs. These IPPs then sign a contract with Eskom to use the Eskom grid, and that power then is going to be flowing to our factories, etc. But who's left out in that is the public system. So whilst pressure will be taken off the grid by these new contracts, starting in about a year, 8 months to a year, and then really picking up steam, there are 13 gigawatts of these projects waiting. The public system is what's failing us, and what's going to happen is instead of an orderly transition, the so-called just transition, we're going to have these big new power plants coming onto the grid. The current coal ones will collapse, and instead of an orderly transition, looking after the workers, doing it in an orderly way, who's going to suffer because of the energy ministry is the coal mining workers, the coal towns, etc., because we have collapse instead of orderly transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that was my next point to you. Is that now where the answer lies for people in our country, just ordinary consumers? It's not going to come. The answer is not going to come from Eskom. It must surely then come from getting off the grid. And you talk about a good news story. There is that subsidy as well that was announced just some weeks ago, insofar as getting solar panels into households.
So for the small users, yes, there is the subsidy. It's a very small subsidy, though. I've looked at it. It doesn't really make that much difference to the economics. And unfortunately, the economics for mid to upper income households now is quite good. to, well, it's not getting completely off the grid, but to putting up your own panels, battery, and inverter. But once again, the lower income households and the poor are left in the lurch. And that is the problem here. You know, the rich always look after themselves. Well, not very well. We're losing our middle class rapidly, you know, through the economic decline, the recession, etc. So what's happening is the worst outcome is instead of the whole country developing, etc., we're kind of going back to last century, where an elite and a privileged few look after themselves, and the government, this energy ministry, which is meant to be getting power for everybody, is just simply letting us down. And it's for, I think it's ideological reasons. They are anti-renewables and they are anti-IPPs, private power producers. And it's this kind of dog in the manger. You know, if we can't build new coal-fired power stations that we want, then nobody gets anything. And that is truly sad.
And there is that discussion, as always, that the reason why renewables is not top of the agenda is because it doesn't provide an opportunity for corruption. I believe that Andre de Ruyter, the former Eskom CEO, said roundabout the same thing. Hilton, let me thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. We're still knee-deep in stage 6 load shedding, so this is a discussion we're always interested in. Hilton Trollip is an energy expert, joining us as we continue to track the story.